Voice training is a tough process that often takes a lot of trans girls a very long time to get used to. I'm making this video because I want to make everything that's so complex about voice training to become completely simple. These are just my personal thoughts as someone who did voice training all on her own. I did watch YouTube videos for help, but I didn't completely understand them, which is part of why I'm making this video. This is just how I did it as a confused girl, because that's probably what you are too. But all are welcome to this video. If you're trans femme of any variety, as long as you want to change your voice, this is a video for you. It's also fine not to change your voice. Ask yourself, am I doing this voice training for me, or am I doing it so that society will see me a certain way? Only do it if it's for you. If you speak in a more masculine voice and feel that that represents you, even though you're represented physically in a feminine manner, that's fine. This video is for people whose inner voice is trapped inside, and the way to get it out, or at least the way I did it. The visuals for this video are completely irrelevant. I'm just trying to talk and get my thoughts out there for everyone. I've heard a lot of trans girls complain that the videos they're watching about voice training don't make any sense, or the words are too scientific and it's way too confusing. This video is for those people. For my understanding of voice training, the first thing you should know about is the throat muscle. You've probably heard it mentioned before. It's what relates to resonance. Sometimes it's hard to even know, what does it even feel like? Is that my throat muscle I feel in my throat? If I make that squeezing feeling, is that it? As I feel it tighten? And partially, somewhat what I did there was tension on my own neck, which means that it wasn't wholly my throat. And that's not the throat muscle, that was my neck muscle. All within your throat, you can feel that there's a muscle back there. The more you try to talk with your inner voice, you may notice that your voice begins to strain. The throat muscle could also be called the voice muscle. It's just what you need to master in order to choose the way your voice comes out of your mouth. The voice is an instrument that you have to learn to play, and the way to do it is to build it up like a muscle. Right now, the muscle is weak and it only does what it used to do. But when you push it, you'll make lots of progress. The easiest way to think of voice training is weight training. Lifting weights at the gym is something just about everybody understands. You lift something heavy, it puts strain on your muscle. You do as many reps as you can, or as many as you plan to do, and then you go home and rest on those muscles for a day so that they come back stronger. Use, healing. Use, healing. Voice training is the same. Tightening your throat muscle leads to you having more control over your resonance. Resonance is one of those difficult words that people struggle to understand. For this video, I'll put it simply as changing the way your voice is perceived. In the beginning, you'll hardly notice a difference, and you'll feel dysphoric about your voice, but you'll sound just the tiniest bit more feminine every time you do it. Now for another gym comparison, if you're an unvoice-trained person trying to sound more feminine, picture your voice as a weak, flimsy arm. You can only do 5 reps on the 15-pound weight for now. The voice you have inside is something you need to build up to. You can't pick up the 100-pound weight right now, and you can't do 5 reps on it because you're not strong enough. It's just in your throat. As your throat muscle develops, your inner voice will naturally want to come out when you speak, because then you'll have mastery over your voice. In the beginning, voice training is an extremely dysphoric experience. Every time you try to let your inner voice out and you hear a bastardized version of the voice you already hate, it feels absolutely sickening. At least it did for me. There's not an easy way to tell you that that never goes away. It'll lessen. Like by now for me, as someone who's been voice trained for about 3 years, there are definitely days where I think to myself, I really wish I sounded different, or I wish I sounded better. But I know that I put a lot of work in, and overall I feel so much better. Back in the beginning of voice training, it was every single second I just thought about, that sounded disgusting, I shouldn't live, this is so gross, I'm such a failure, everyone's gonna make fun of me. Voice training is something you need to take day by day, making little gains, which means you should never hate yourself for voice cracking or breaking up, sounding a bit forced or overly flamboyant. It's just the beginning. Your attempts to sound the way you want to that feel like they fail, the ones that really sting, aren't failures that you can let bury you if you ever want to succeed. They're not true failures at all. If you went to the gym today and lifted until you couldn't anymore, you technically lifted till failure. But you didn't really fail. You went to the gym to strengthen your arms. After your rest day, your arms will be stronger than they were before, meaning you succeeded. You just stopped before you hurt yourself. Right now, try to flex your throat muscle. You might be thinking, I still don't know what the fuck that means. Well, here's the best technique to help figure out if you're doing this technique right. Put your hand, for me, I like to use my pointer finger and my index finger. Wait, that's not right. That's my middle finger. I like to use my pointer finger and my middle finger. And on the Adam's apple, there's just one, it's just one thing, but it feels like two different balls, right? You put your fingers on each one and swallow, just gulp. You felt it go all the way back and it comes forward. Now, just get used to that position it's in right now while you're not speaking. Now speak normally, just say a random sentence. Say, now I know where the throat muscle is. When you did that, you may have noticed that your Adam's apple was slightly raised. When you do this, you should be able to feel your Adam's apple moving up and down as you speak. Before voice training, usually the Adam's apple goes down when you talk, due to having a more masculine voice. Now try to let your inner voice out. And the way I recommend trying to do this, for me, there was something screaming deep inside me that really wanted to get out. I only ever felt like myself in text because I could project the voice that I had inside onto the text in my head. But I didn't really sound that way. If that strategy is working only a little or not enough, picture the woman's voice that you most want to sound like. Think back on all the voices you've heard in your life. Which one made you feel the most envy? Which one made you think, that's me or almost me? Try to lean towards that as well. Now that you've thought about your inner voice, try to let it out. Say, now I know what the throat muscle is. Now that you've spoken, you may have noticed that when you used your inner voice, your Adam's apple should have raised ever so slightly. And if it didn't, try to make your Adam's apple raise by making higher and higher sounds. The higher I go up, the higher it raises. You can hear that this is not very natural for me at all. And maybe if I practiced this, I would be able to sound good like this. But that would be another thing where I voice train it. The reason it sounds strained and broken right now is that that's my untrained range. This is the range I'm comfortable in, which is why my voice sounds complete when I talk like this. It's okay that my other voice didn't sound completely accurate yet to a higher-pitched voice. It's okay that my voice wasn't completely clear yet. It's okay that it kinda hurt to do that, because it was the first time I tried that. Try it again, say whatever you want, and feel your voice raise. Put your fingers deep onto the Adam's apple so you can feel if it moves. Try to speak as femininely as you can, and say, I have just started voice training. Say it as many times as you need until you can feel your Adam's apple raising. Done? Perfect. Now there's a giant hill you have to climb. I'll be giving you your boulder, and you have to push it up this mountain. And the mountain's so big, you can't get up it in one day. You're gonna need to do this every single day. The way that I voice trained is every single day I tried to force my inner voice out. At first, I sounded really flamboyant and awkward and strained, and a little bit like Janice from Friends. And at first, if you're as dysphoric as I was, you'll feel sickened. It'll feel annoying. But remember, any second you spend using the voice you hate, wishing you had a different voice, is a day you've wasted. Your inner voice wants to come out, and your life will feel so much better when it finally does. Again, unless you don't really need to voice train, which can be the case. Maybe you'll think you wanted to go very feminine, and then suddenly you'll feel like, I'm actually happy here. So your voice training journey may end at a different point than mine did. Not every voice that belongs to a woman has to be only identifiable as a completely feminine thing. An example of an extremely feminine voice is a voice that is both very high-pitched and soft-spoken. Not every girl will sound like that, though. Most cis women don't sound only feminine or completely feminine. So try not to hate yourself for not being at one of the extremes. Just channel yourself through your voice. In a spiritual sense, it's like pulling yourself through your own throat, like the clown with all the ropes that go down the neck. You have to accept right now, if you want to voice train, this is a daily commitment that you'll need to do for the rest of your life. Missing a day doesn't really matter. It just means that's one day you could have spent training. It's one day you basically stopped the grind, so to say. Not very Sigma of you. God, I should cut that out. The voice you want or the voice you picture yourself with, it's probably completely unfathomable to you right now. For you to think, I can really be that. Because for me, I thought I'd never ever get to this point. And I got to a point I was happy with within like a year. Of course, I still had my doubts back then, and I still do now. I still get vocal envy. I get a lot of vocal envy from Jessica Rabbit, or Evelyn from League of Legends, for another example. Vocal dysphoria will never disappear. Just like, no matter how feminine you look in body, it'll never really go away that you wish something about you changed. But it'll be more like the dysphoria that the average person has, where it's just, I really wish this changed about me, rather than this isn't me at all, which is what I believe that trans dysphoria is. If you have any doubts that you can succeed at voice training every day, like I'll probably drop it or I'll get too frustrated, just remind yourself that having a voice is something you have every day. A voice is something that you can lose. If you didn't speak for 3 months and then you tried to open your mouth again, you would sound quite a lot different. Your throat muscle would become so weak because it hasn't been activated much at all. Don't worry too much though. It's not like a law of equivalent exchange where if you don't voice train for 2 days, suddenly you're 2 days in reverse. Not at all. It takes a very long time to go in reverse. It's quite similar to when if you used to go to the gym and you come back, you may build that old muscle back up quicker than someone who never went to the gym at all. For an example, if you voice trained for 3 weeks every single day, you spent about 3 hours speaking that day. Not like you need to track that, that would be maddening. I just recommend speaking quite a lot because the more you speak, the more you're training. Think about how much do I speak in a day. Your inner voice wants to be present at all of those moments when you speak. So practicing at all of those moments is the best thing you can do. The problem with that, though, is some people aren't in safe environments. Like, they may get bullied for it in public, though I do truly recommend enduring it because it's still worth it. If all it is words, fuck 'em. Though I know it's much scarier than that. If you feel like I can't voice train in my own home because maybe I have a unsupportive family member who might be listening, one thing that I did before I was sure if my parents were supportive or not is they heard me trying to change my voice and they cracked a little joke about it because they thought I was just doing it for funsies. They didn't think that it was serious at all. I told them that learning to speak like a girl would give me a large range for voice acting. So during this time, they didn't even think I was trans. They just believed I was doing vocal training. It's quite a silly lie that might not work on some people, especially if you've never voice trained before or if for some reason the family member you have is very intrusive. Or if they perhaps hate the way you sound during the transition, which some people will. I had times where people told me I sounded really annoying. Only one really mean person, but it stays with you. If you don't think you can voice train safely at work or at home, if you have a car or anywhere hidden, do whatever you can to train. Even if you have to speak softly under your breath, even if you have to go to the furthest part of the house and cover yourself in blankets. If you ever want your inner voice to be what comes out of your mouth, you have to do this. When you first begin voice training, you'll have a somewhat sore throat quite a lot of the time. Not in a way that's too annoying as long as you keep drinking water. But a strained throat means maybe you can stop for the day. Lifting with strain can be dangerous and can often be fatiguing. Me personally, though, I just kept lifting and lifting and lifting. A lot of nights my throat would be sore and I'd sit there thinking my voice was so disgusting and vile, unnatural. Sometimes people made fun of me by doing a Valley Girl voice at me. All of these things are things that could happen to you during your transition. Although the Valley Girl thing will only happen if you add too much vocal fry. Which might be a good segue to, what the fuck is vocal fry? To answer with an onomatopoeia, that is under your voice. That is under your voice. It's that bit of sound. If I try to remove all vocal fry, I begin to sound like this. Although I did still have a little bit, this is me trying very hard not to have any vocal fry. And then when I add some vocal fry, it gives my voice a slightly different quality. Not gruff, but more... gravelly could be the word, but I wouldn't describe my voice as gravelly. You have to find out, what do I sound like? Who are the people that I've heard that sound how I want to sound? And why do they sound that way? The way you can figure that out is, what's their pitch? And you can figure that out by listening. What's their speech pattern like? As in, how do they carry their words? How fast do they speak? How fast should you speak? Speaking more slowly is technically always the best thing to do. Oftentimes, if your brain goes a mile a minute, a little bit too much ADHD or something like me, it gets really difficult. Figure out how breathy the voice is. Figure out if the person uses more chest voice or throat voice. And thinking about your chest voice will always do a lot for your voice. Speaking with your chest voice will make your voice more clear in general. And I had a hard time figuring out quite what that means. But just try to speak and project a bit, but try to feel it in your chest and from the top of your throat. It feels different than talking otherwise. This is me trying pretty hard to project my chest voice just a bit. And then when I don't put much effort into the chest voice at all, you'll notice that it falls to a different quality. Not necessarily a bad one, but a different one. These are all things you should consider for your own voice. Do I speak more nasal or more clear is one thing too. I hated sounding nasally. I used to, especially because I used to have a lot of allergic reactions. The way I stopped being nasal is just focusing on using more of my throat and my chest voice and not involving my nose in when I speak. If I add my nose when I talk, maybe that's a little exaggerated, but that is one difference you may have in your voice if you wish. And you can do it in different ways. There's a million ways to sound different. It can depend on where your tongue is, the size of your mouth, how much you open your mouth when you speak. Here's an example of me having my mouth very open while I talk. Here's an example of me having my mouth very closed while I talk. I actually wouldn't describe that as very closed, it was quite closed, but in a natural way that wouldn't feel annoying if you were to talk like that intentionally. Find the spot you're comfortable with. Although at first you probably don't feel comfortable with any of it, follow your heart for doing it. Whatever feels the most natural, it'll feel mostly all unnatural, but something will stick out more than the others. I didn't know what I was going for when I was voice training. This was just coming out of me. Though I've always been envious of seductress characters that speak with a breathy tone. So though I didn't train directly off of them, they were in my mind, meaning they influenced me. Another vocal tip in general that doesn't have to do with being trans is enunciating can make your voice sound more precise. I don't always enunciate particularly well. Right now I'm trying pretty hard, but right there when I said particularly, or however I said it, I should have said particularly. Not everyone's voice is clear and precise though. If you want to voice train, I recommend playing with your voice as well. That won't be part of the training, but playing with your voice means doing whatever wacky thing you want with it. Or just testing, do I sound different when I act a certain way or hold my face a certain way? The whole time I've been talking right now, I have my face in a giant smile, and I'm trying to keep a slightly faster tone of speaking. I was struggling a bit and I ran out of breath, and I believe I sounded a bit worse. But if I choose to sound that way, now I can because I'm playing with my voice. A sillier version
Is that if you start, like, tightening off the throat muscle really hard, like closing the throat really hard, you can sound pretty silly. And then if I add, like, nasal and I close off the top, I can sound like I have a cold.
If you find it amusing to make silly noises or do silly voices at yourself, that will help you voice train. Because now your voice knows how to do something new, meaning your muscle is now practiced. Voice training is just voice practice. Part of your voice training regimen could literally contain you going, because that'll all change your voice. You shouldn't be doing that for multiple hours, but hey, you do you. Making the mouth smaller and slowing down your speech pattern definitely makes you sound more feminine, but that might not be the femininity that you represent. For example, while I try to keep my mouth very closed, sure I still sound alright, but it doesn't really feel like me, so I make it a bit more open. Or rather, not necessarily that I keep it open, but I let it come out a different way. Let's take some steps to try to get you to speak with your mouth being a bit smaller, your tongue being back ever so slightly, Raise the throat muscle as much as you can. Check by putting your fingers on the trachea/Adam's apple. If you feel it rising, you're doing this properly. Now just speak, maybe you can sing, do whatever you want. Just make sure that Adam's apple's raised and you're working that muscle. When your voice gets too strained, that might be a good sign to stop. I never listened to that sign and I kept going, and that worked very beautifully for me. If you feel it's taking a toll on you though, do not push yourself. Now that you're ready to voice train, checking with your fingers. So your mouth should be small, your tongue should be back, and your fingers should be on your trachea. Now that you're in that position, let out your inner voice. Speak any sentence you wish. You can even repeat after me, whatever I've said. All that matters is that you let words out of your mouth. Or sounds. Because sounds can be perceived as more masculine or feminine. Which is often a struggle of voice training, is that when you train, your voice will come off as more feminine more quickly than your laugh or your giggle will. I used to be quite insecure about my laugh when I was first voice training, and it took me a few years to feel like it was in a better spot. And you can laugh train, you just have to be laughing at yourself. Which feels a little degrading, but doesn't it feel fitting? It'll feel a bit demoralizing at first, and you'll need to psych yourself up. Remind yourself that this is you, and the only way to break your chains is to keep pulling at them with your throat muscle. After so much time spent training, I don't have to think about any of these techniques when I talk. Though for the first few months you have to, or the first few weeks, there's nothing wrong with that at all. One day it'll be completely natural, because you've done it almost every day. Voice training can often feel very isolating because of how anxiety-inducing the thought of using that voice in front of a new person is. People can tell you sound flamboyant or a little gay or whatever, because that will happen early on. I sounded a bit flamboyant and gay at least, and people did comment on it. It was just a messy spot on my path to being who I want to be. The isolation of voice training and how often it can feel like you're not making any progress at all, or you still hate your voice, or you feel deeply embarrassed by your attempts. Just know that the same exact thing happened to me. You weren't alone in your suffering. Every trans girl who's voice trained has been through it too. To bring you through this journey, I'm going to show you old clips from when I began, and tell you the story of how it all started and why I decided to voice train at all. June 2nd, 2021. By this time, I had known I was a girl for about 4 years. During that time, I had massive vocal dysphoria, and I still played with my voice and did impressions, just on the masculine side. I didn't have any faith I could ever sound different. I had a very deep voice, and I didn't think it could ever change. Even though I had known I was trans since I was 14, I hadn't told anyone in my daily life at all. My family believed I was just voice acting. I wasn't on any HRT, and I didn't believe in myself at all. I thought I'd just rot in my room my whole life until I died. So of course the way I spent my time was on GTA 5 roleplay. I hated existing so much, and I didn't have many friends at the time. I used GTA 5 roleplay as a means to express my femininity, since I was hiding it from my parents. Even though I had come out to the friends I did have online, I still had a lot of self-hate and didn't really let me be myself. June 2nd wasn't a day I planned to begin voice training, but something I stumbled into. Sometimes something's irking at you for the longest time, and something pushes you right past the edge. I decided to make a girl character in the GTA 5 roleplay server to represent myself better. Before that, I had played a boy character because I knew my voice would be perceived that way. I spent hours making a beautiful goth chick. Making that GTA girl was the first time I got to express my femininity in a way. A friend of mine helped run the server I made the character on, and she brought me to the car dealership there so that I could have consistent transportation. She got busy and had to log out, so I was left alone in the dealership for a few minutes. I was feeling pretty awkward and nervous about interacting, even though it was just online. There was only one other person logged into the server. I had never met them. It was a very small server. The community was really tightly knit, and I was the newest member. The only other person online at the time suddenly came into the dealership behind me. He spoke in an excited voice and said, "Hello, miss." And I responded, "Hi." For a few moments, he said nothing and just stood there. Then he used the in-game menu to switch his walk style to the scared-looking one and turned his back to me, leaving the dealership. I was pretty dumbfounded by it. Like, sure, it's just a joke in a game, but God, at the time, I felt absolutely horrible about it. He was just trying to make a joke, but it made me feel like I'd never be seen as the woman I am. If people instantly heard my voice and thought, man, I couldn't handle that. Find it so disgusting to be seen that way. It made me feel ugly and sickened. So from that day forth, I never ever stopped voice training. I felt really frustrated that in the one place I thought I could finally be seen as completely feminine, I instantly got made to feel otherized. Spite is a very powerful motivator. For a while, I thought the anger that motivated me was toward the guy who made me feel so repulsive. The reality of it was that all the hate bubbling inside me was all toward myself. I resented my voice, my birth, and my entire cursed body. A body that didn't feel like mine at all. A voice that repels or is considered manly. It just wasn't me. Some people say you need to love yourself to truly make progress, but I disagree. What you need is internal motivation, passion. Passion is dual-sided, love and hate. I didn't love myself so deeply that I committed to such a change. I hated myself so violently that I couldn't stand existence. That rage wasn't new, but very repressed and buried, and I didn't handle it well for years. I'd hit things, hurt myself, get my knuckles bruised, punch my own skull, choking myself for the way I sound, which is of course a stupid action to take because it only damages your voice. But when you hate yourself that much, sometimes it just comes out of you. I used voice training to get myself together, a forever commitment to my voice. It wasn't a hard choice when I really thought about it. What is there to lose? This video was made for my friends who've been really frustrated with voice training. I often get asked, how did you get over that pain? How did you deal with it? They'll say something like, I can't handle hearing myself that often, and every time I train, I start to feel shameful and hate myself. How do I stop feeling this way? The first thing to realize is that the shame you feel is the shame from hating the way you sound, and the only way to change the way you sound is to continue your training. It's a vicious cycle, but one that I use to my advantage. How did I personally get over that pain? I didn't. I used it. I hated hearing myself. I hated that my throat hurt almost every night. I hated that I couldn't tell if I was progressing. I hated that I wasn't where I wanted to be with my voice. I hated that it was strained every night. I hated that every second I had to be insecure about my voice. I turned that hate into motivation to keep going. Otherwise, that pain would hold me down forever. It's not that you stop feeling the hate, but it becomes motivation. Every time I thought about how much I hated my voice, instead of deciding that I need to give up, it made me think I need to keep going. My training consisted of talking to others and to myself. There was no special regimen or techniques. I simply spoke while trying to change my resonance with my throat muscle. Now that I've told you about my journey, it's only fair that you get to hear it. I want to give an exact representation of what realistic progress looks like by showing you exactly what my progress was. I'm going to be using clips where I was speaking at different points during my vocal transition. First, we're going to start with how I sounded before.
I found it. Are you here? Oh, I saw that. Stop stepping on me, you freak.
It feels pretty bad to share that. During this time, I was quite unhappy with my voice because obviously it wasn't feminine. Now let's get into when the voice training began. This clip comes from June 28th, 2021.
Hug 2. I know what Hug 1 is. What's Hug 2? Oh, it's like the same one.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't look that much different from Hug 1.
He's the one
Full
with
gear
his
shift. Your gas is leaking. Hello? God damn it.
In this clip, it's clearly very different from when I started, but I don't sound particularly feminine after a month. And it's audibly clear how straining it is on my voice to be sounding the way I was there. Back then, my issue was that I spoke quite nasally and forced sounds harder than I needed to. An example of doing that now is right now. But then if I do it just right, it's actually a pretty accurate Valley Girl. But that's not what we're going for here. I was trying a little too hard to get a higher pitch. This next clip is from August 3rd, month 2 of the transition.
Ming, let me hand you some. Here you go, have one mag. I didn't know, I was almost out of mags too. I've been off my game in terms of violence. I have not been stalking. I used to never leave, I would never enter any public area without like 5 of everything. 5 shotgun mags, 5 pistol mags, 5 armor, like 3 joints.
In this clip, I noticed I wasn't speaking as forcefully or as nasally, but my voice was a bit deeper than I wanted it to be. I was utilizing vocal fry in these clips a bit better than I was, but I think I sounded extremely inconsistent. I remember every single night I was training, I'd have so many moments where I felt hopeless, so disgusted with how I sounded. Now we'll move to October, month 4 of voice training.
Since they've R1, fuck it.
Yeah, because they know which highway you're going on. Yeah, they probably immediately said one goes one side, pushes down the spikes, other goes one side, pushes down the spikes.
You see R1?
Oh yeah, it's right behind you. Do you want me to watch for
right
spikes,
above
or do you want me to watch for R1? No, it's well behind you. Well, not well behind you, it's fucking close, but it's above you. Yeah, I guess you look for spikes, I'll look at the people behind us.
Yeah, don't worry.
Yeah, everyone's about to pass you.
This month was the hardest for me. I never came close to quitting since I didn't even view it as an option. But I was sometimes hurting myself or thinking about hurting myself over how angry I was with my voice. I think it's normal to feel that way about this process. It's painful. I spent 2 days after this was recorded constantly thinking about how disgusting I sounded, how much I wanted to die over my own voice. Before I made this video, I wasn't really sure how I'd make it. I wasn't sure if I'd show my whole journey or what bits to show, but I knew I had to show this one. Because this is where I struggled the most. My voice was still a bit strained and faulty, but it was better than I'd ever been. It's very important to remember that when you voice train, every day spent training is one day closer to your goal. That is the groundwork in which this is all built. Now, November 23rd, almost month 6 of voice training.
Also, we're probably gonna have this out for the whole day. Do you want to soup this fucking thing real fast? Like, no changes. Just like, just give it all the shit. Because I can pay you for a full
For some reason, the
full
live
change
chicken and the
once the
weed in
garages
my
are
pocket.
back.
Yeah.
This thing is considered better than the drafter, apparently. Apparently giving it suspension level 3 is the best thing for traction. Yeah, look how much you can feel the difference in a reverse now. So how much shit did you say you were carrying? We can hit something. Only reason I want to is that fucking, now that finances are going down and I'm probably gonna have a massive fucking fine later, I want to make some money.
I felt horrible about my voice during this time as well. But again, it's an improvement over the last. My vocal fry has gotten much better, and I noticed that when I'm not trying to force my voice louder or more nasal, I started to sound pretty good. Remember to try to sound natural, naturally you. If your voice sounds a bit too screechy or a bit too then you're pushing the throat muscle too hard. It's like lifting above your weight class and trying to use your nose to compensate. It just doesn't work. I'll add another moment from this day where I was in distress, because a big issue you may run into during your training is worrying over your laugh or your screams not sounding transitioned. Any of those rare sounds your voice does will get feminine a bit slower than the rest of your voice does.
Okay, here's the deal. He walks towards the car. Alright, open fire. Does that sound good? It looks like it sounds good.
Doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound good. I think the sound of that.
I think it sounds great.
Better.
What do I do?
They're ganking. They're flanking us now. They're flanking us now.
Yeah. Does that sound good? Does that flank sound good?
Just go.
Get in!
Now, December 18th. This marks just over 6 months of voice training.
3.
Only 3.
Yes.
I counted 8 last time. Fuck.
Sure.
Only after we're gone. Yeah, only if you do that instead of searching him, because I planted
Can I get 2
all
wishes
the
from
money
you
on
guys?
him. Alright, walk with beam.
Alright.
I don't know why I'm taking them on these junctions. These junctions are bad for fucking Mustang. I actually will go hide the take because I actually got a fuck ton. I have a backup car at La Fuente Blanca, just in case they do see me. It wasn't intended to be a backup car, but it kind of is. The Mustang sucks off-road and he's never driven it. He probably swerved out. And there's the garage of the cartel. Oh no, the garage of the cartel is scuffed. Fuck, I can't store anything there.
In this clip, I can hear the real me. Sometimes looking back, it's like I'm hearing a different girl. But in this clip, I hear somewhat how I sound now. Sometimes I watch these clips back and I think to myself, I didn't sound feminine enough while I was angry or upset. But it's true of any feminine voice that when you're distressed, you sound distressed. It sounds so obvious it's stupid, but during the training, it often feels so shameful just to try, even when you did nothing wrong. Now we'll move to February 12th, 2022.
So the way this works, as far as I know, is we discovered it. So Marcella walked up to this and just let her in. We're like, this is probably a local's car. How the fuck did it let her in? And then we tried this panto and it didn't let us in. But Daisy can't get into any of them. And so whenever Daisy checks the car and we try and get back in the car, it locks. So I think only thing I can think of that would cause this.
I expected to see a major increase in progress during these months, but I think I sound worse here than I did in December. It's so long ago now that I'm not sure how I was feeling at the time or if I was doing anything different. But what I noticed the issue could be is that it sounds like I'm trying to raise my pitch in an unnatural manner. One note I wrote to myself years ago is that I sound best when I speak softly and in my natural pitch. Voice training isn't about raising your pitch until it's a quote-unquote girly pitch. It's about finding yourself with your voice, like I said earlier. My voice right now is clearly feminine, but ask yourself this. Do you think my current voice is high-pitched? I don't. My voice's feminine quality comes from the resonance, not the pitch. In December, I sounded much more collected and comfortable in my own voice than I do in February. Don't stretch out your voice too much by trying to go for a high pitch. It'll make you sound worse and feel worse about yourself. A quick sidebar since we're discussing pitch. Do not put too much focus on those apps that tell you if your pitch is a woman's pitch or a man's pitch. I didn't use that a single time and I sound like this now. You do not need it. I avoided looking at them because I knew it would impede progress and I'd begin to obsess over those numbers trying to get them to rise every day. If you're unaware of what these are, there are some apps that allow you to record your voice and listen back and it tells you about the pitch a little bit. It can be pretty demoralizing, like stepping on the scale too much when you try to lose weight. I wouldn't look at it at all. I didn't, especially because pitch is inconsistent. If you used your voice too much that day, your pitch would be a bit lower and maybe you'd feel bad about it, but don't rely on something inconsistent. Rely completely on the consistency of your training. Now back to the journey. March 2nd, 2022.
Daisy, no clip off. You can find his way down. There's super max spike. Find your way down. Does admin like does he like being? He just flew in. Does he like being teleported?
I don't know. I didn't like being teleported. I didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Well, what'd you
I saw
come in to do?
Daisy.
No one's on. I was about to fly out, and I was like, I should just leave you on top of Maze Bank. The difference is I have like admin permission to abuse you.
I sound much better than I did in the month prior, and it seems to be due to me having more vocal fry and speaking a bit softer, as well as speaking in my natural pitch zone. Natural pitch zone isn't a real term as much as it's something you feel out. If you can't hit certain notes in a song, that note is out of your current pitch zone, for example. That won't always be true though, because the more you try to hit the note, the closer you get, which is the same with voice training. By today, my voice can go much higher than it did that March. I didn't pitch train, I just kept speaking in my own voice while it developed that it wants to be higher. The muscle keeps getting pushed until it can go higher and higher through constant training. Now for the final part of the journey, May 8th, 2022.
Yeah, I saw the car at long distance. I didn't know if it was him or not. Yeah, because I remembered yesterday that they got into a purple Porsche, but I couldn't remember if it was a 918 or not. Shots fired on the way to that because I lost the 918. There was a fleeing car. There's a purple car leaving that shots fired, but he's nowhere near it now. This shot takes place inside the vanilla unicorn. Only car here is a blue Charger.
By this point, I was finally happy with where my voice was, and it still relatively sound just about how I did back then. My voice has still improved in terms of things like enunciation, speech patterns, and speaking better. But here at the 11-month mark, I'd say the vocal transition was complete. The rest was just fixing it up, buffing out the edges of my voice. Less than 1 year of vocal practice can get you to where you want to be. I worked the throat muscle every single day, which did cause strain. My throat hurt slightly every night at the time. Remember to stay hydrated. It'll be good for your life in general and great for your voice. During my training, it hurt to speak like this for too long. Nowadays, I can speak like this 24/7 and it never hurts unless I've spoken for too long in a short chunk, which is normal for any voice. The reason I can speak this way completely naturally now, after so long of doing it, it doesn't hurt anymore, because it's my natural state. Don't let anyone convince you there's a real voice or what's your natural voice sound like when you're done with transitioning. That old voice you heard isn't my natural voice. It was the voice that resulted of the hormones in my body and the environment I grew up in, and how I chose to use the muscle. Your voice is an instrument that you'll get to play with. The reason there are such misconceptions about voice is simply ignorance. Anyone who judges you based on something ignorant is literally just a fucking dumbass. So remember, anyone harassing you is a dumb fuck. Now that I'm natural in this voice, where do I want to go now? After almost 4 years since I began, I'm happy with how I sound right now, but not wholly satisfied. The insecurity and pain of not sounding how you want will never go away entirely. At least it hasn't for me. During the training, it was a constant pain, just about every single night. Anytime my thoughts got quiet, it was the thought I had. I'm not where I want to be with my voice, and I'm repulsed by the way I sound. That never happens anymore. I just get the fleeting thought of, I wish I could sing better, or, God fucking damn it, I'm not Lucy from Edgerunners. And I know I can be whoever I want to be now, and sound how I want to sound. So one day, I can push myself to those limits. Use all of your willpower. And please, if you're not where you want to be with your voice, train. Starting now.